Hello, this is my third and final video inspired by the film Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Please note that I will be getting into plot-specific spoilers. If you haven't seen the film, I recommend that you do so. From what I've seen online, the third act of this film is probably what has drawn the most criticism. But in my view, the directing duo Daniels sticks the landing. As I've mentioned in part 1 and part 2, this film has a strong effect on many viewers. And for me, the third act is where the film really drives its message home. The second act of the film is a briskly paced, absurdist action comedy interspersed with some touching moments. But in the third act, the film slows down and savors its more dramatic elements. It strongly amplifies and expands upon the themes that Daniels introduced earlier in the film. See, around the beginning of the second act, our protagonist Evelyn, a miserable business owner, wife, and mother, learns about the existence of a multiverse, and she is told about a chaotic, omniversal being, a powerful enemy called Jobu Tubaki. This being has possessed Evelyn's daughter, Joy. Evelyn learns this from Alpha Waymond, an incarnation of her husband from another universe. Alpha Waymond possesses the body of her husband. Looking at this using the 8-circuit model of consciousness, Alpha Waymond can be understood as a Circuit 6 entity. To Evelyn, he is a seemingly autonomous being that may or may not be objectively real. But regardless of that fact, he imparts important knowledge to Evelyn. Evelyn, after some initial doubt, pretty much takes Alpha Waymond's word for what is happening. The knowledge that Alpha Waymond shares with her puts her on a path to eventually becoming a fully realized, omniversal being herself. But that doesn't mean he's right about everything. Alpha Waymond tells Evelyn that her daughter Joy has become, quote, pure chaos, and she has, quote, no real motives or desires. And later he exclaims that she can't be reasoned with. After seeing Jobu in action, Evelyn agrees with Alpha Waymond that Jobu must be defeated in battle. Joy must be freed from this chaos creature that is Jobu Tubaki. This characterization of the dark, chaotic feminine has become almost cliche at this point, and it seems to me that there's a great deal of fear-mongering about chaos in the status quo. And by status quo, I'm referring to the consensus reality most of us are living in. It's comprised of the first 4 circuits in 8-circuit yoga. All we need to do is look back at the last few centuries of anguished philosophers attempting to deal with their anxiety about existence. They try to find meaning and purpose within this supposed chaotic, nasty world. One of my favorite Terence McKenna quotes is when he said the following about recent key figures in mainstream philosophy and science. These clowns were on a bad trip and were loud about it. In the status quo, I often hear that disorder and entropy are a threat to be neutralized. Chaos is around the corner, and it will destroy the sanity and health of individuals and the sanity and health of society if we don't do something about it. In order to succeed in life, one must fight the chaos, oppose it. One must forcefully carve out as much order in life as possible. If we do not fight this chaos demon off, chaos will swallow us whole. These days you can find all sorts of advice on how to live your life. There are rules for life, supposed antidote to chaos. There's the hustle grind culture where constant action, doing more and more will bring about success. To me, the characters from the Alphaverse are a representation of this way of living in the world. The term alpha connotates dominance, strength, winning, taking the bull by its horn, forceful energy. Alpha Waymond and Alpha Grandpa, his boss, are send-ups of classic action movie hero figures. The alphas are convinced that they will restore order in the multiverse. To me, the Alphaverse and its heroes are representations of Yin Energy, found in some forms of Chinese philosophy. Yin is an energy with many different characteristics. Here are some of the key ones: forcefulness, action-oriented, defiant, individualistic. Yin favors logic, reason, conscious power. It shuns intuitive knowing. It's much more direct. Yin energy is represented by the bright white areas within this archetypal image. There are many ways to interpret this symbol, but in this video I want to explore a particular approach to it. And that is using the Yin Yang symbol to better understand the question of the polarity of opposites. The sort of cliched broad understanding of this image is that there are 2 opposing forces in life, And these two forces in life must be in balance. Kind of like the balance of the light side and the dark side of the Force in Star Wars. The way I see it, the anti-chaos crowd basically argues that the Yan values of order, rationality, logic, and forceful power must be fought for. If not, the dark side of this image, the chaos, will win the day. Chaos is often characterized as feminine, and sometimes identified with the supposed savagery of less civilized ethnic groups. C.G. Jung and his collaborator Marie-Louise von Franz, brilliant people that I admire deeply for many reasons, they themselves at times unfortunately made troubling arguments along these lines. Thankfully, these comments aren't representative of the work as a whole. Many today like to reference Jung's confrontation with the unconscious, but I'd like to argue that if you look at the overall arc of Jung's work, the term confrontation should be in many places replaced with the word conversation. Jung's conversation with the unconscious. One could argue that Everything, Everywhere, All at Once is a film about a stressed out lady having a conversation with her unconscious mind, sorting her life out through fantastical adventures in her imagination. An Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass type narrative. But let me get back to the symbol. This symbol can be used to represent the fact that you can't go too far in either direction, order or chaos, light or dark, because if you go too far in one direction, an opposing force will rise. Trying to live in a balanced way can of course be helpful to navigate ourselves through the status quo game playing that we do on a daily basis. In fact, I've noticed most conversations on human behavior can be ended with a nice glib, well, we can all agree that balance is important. And it must be said that advice like make your bed, clean your room, organize your schedule is pragmatic and practical enough. Sure, let's think through options, let's make a plan. That's all fine. And on the other hand, literally called the path of the left hand, some traditions hold that one must actively dive into the dark side, the chaos, and the societal taboos that come with all that. But in my view, there's much more to this symbol than the surface level polarity of opposites. And the film Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, I think explores this very well. See, Evelyn initially lives in alpha mode. Evelyn says, every day I fight for all of us. And she certainly does go into battle. She fights Jobu's minions. And she's ready to fight the dark, feminine agent of chaos, Jobu Tsubaki herself. This would be a pleasing enough movie, and I think some viewers wish the film was this way for its entirety. But it turns out this supposed unreasonable agent of total chaos isn't what the Alphaverse thinks she is. When Evelyn tries to fight Jobu, she realizes that it's futile. So Evelyn asks the pertinent question. If you don't want to fight me, then what's all this for? And that's a pretty good question. Joy basically answers, I'm not here to fight you, I'm here to show you. And she does so through comical, absurdist, dark feminine imagery. Joy gives Evelyn an explosive experience of the multiverse, and Evelyn faces existential emptiness, the void. After Evelyn and Joy share a pataphysical ha-ha at the bitter meaninglessness of it all, things take a turn. Joy makes an unexpected confession. The camera, which had been locked down, showing the viewer still, static images, now begins to move fluidly. The soundtrack, which had been quiet, now comes in with a subtle bell tone. A small opening has manifested. We are now in a transformative moment of change. This brings to my mind the moment where figure lines transform during I Ching readings. This is when a situation has become stuck and static, and there's no more runway to drive forward on, but a seedling of change is sprouting. You see, chaotic meaninglessness and orderly meaning are not really opposites. They are a continuum. They only seem like opposites from a particular point of view. That particular point of view is the Alphaverse way of looking at things. Us versus them. The truth is that Joy, as the omniversal being Jobu Tsubaki, wasn't an unreasonable chaotic enemy. She started a violent killer cult disturbing the harmony of the multiverse. Sure, okay. But she tells Evelyn that she's done all of this out of desperation and hope. A hope that Evelyn would see what Joy has seen, but find another way. Despite all of her omniversal goddess power, Joy felt like there was something that she was missing. Initially, it seemed like Joy was this chaos agent. Then it seems like this is a misery loves company type situation, where Joy just didn't want to be alone. But what Joy actually wanted was an alternative to the nihilism that consumed her and her cultists. And Joy hoped that Evelyn, her mom, could see an alternative. Joy quickly gives up on that idea, but this moment of transformation isn't lost on Evelyn. Evelyn takes a good look at her existence, and she does find an alternative. That alternative and that other way is embodied in the figure of Waymond, her husband. But not Alpha Waymond. He succumbed to his battle. See, if you fight chaos and try to solve disorder like it's solely a logistical problem, a tactical problem, if you battle what seems to be the overwhelming meaninglessness of life as some sort of agent or ambassador of order and logic, you will always lose. In fact, Jobu, the chaos agent, was created because Evelyn pushed her daughter too hard in the first place. This battle against chaos inevitably results in more emptiness, nihilism, and frustration because, as I said before, it's a continuum. Evelyn finds the alternative to all of this. She finds it in the, quote, silly husband that she's been so frustrated with. No one calls him Beta Waymond, but that's basically how she saw him for most of the film. He's not vigorous enough. He's not manly enough. He lacks the Yin energy. He lacks fight. But in this moment of transformation, Evelyn sees Waymond differently. A peak psychedelic transcendent experience envelops Evelyn. During it, she sees that her husband lives his life embodying different values. Sure, he wants to win at the status quo game for himself and his family, but he goes about his entire life differently. He shares that he's also lost in the meaninglessness and guilt that is so endemic to the status quo. But his approach to it isn't to fight against life with Yin forcefulness. He lives his life by the principle of kindness. He explains his way of fighting is different. He is patient and he is caring. And he has a good dose of hilaritas. He likes to laugh and is good-natured, even though he's in the same dire straits as his wife. Evelyn realizes the power of Yin energy. Some of the characteristics of Yin are receptiveness, understanding, empathy, yielding, relationship management. It favors intuitive knowing over logic and reason as a guide to navigating situations. Yin is subtle and hidden. Yin is the true essence of the dark aspect, not chaos. Your experience of the world as total chaos only arises when you try to focus exclusively on forcefulness and Yin energy. The Alpha versus Yin energy is like a proverbial hammer. It treats everything like a nail. And a hammer is a very useful tool, but not everything is a nail to forcefully pound on. I think Alpha Waymond's speech to Evelyn earlier in the film is a good example of how futile the Alpha universe approach is. It's a perfunctory and cliché speech about defeating Jobu in order to get things back to the way they were. But there is no getting back. I suspect if we're all being honest with ourselves, most of us would realize the way it was never that good for most of us anyways. So instead of searching for a way back like the Alphas, Yin Waymond navigates his way forward through life differently. He chooses to be flexible, kind, and find the humor in situations as a way of navigating status quo gameplay. Evelyn berates Yin Waymond for serving cookies to the IRS auditor who threatens their family's well-being. But the human connection Waymond established with her actually saves his family from the IRS. In part 1, I talked about how Evelyn's yogic journey started in earnest when she expressed love to the IRS agent. The agent is an archetypal representation of a crone figure. She represents how Evelyn's life has become withered and bitter. The agent is a pataphysical mirror reflection of Evelyn. When Evelyn expresses love to the agent, Evelyn accesses power that comes through the higher circuits in the 8-circuit model. And this act of love kicks off Evelyn's absurdist yogic journey. But quickly after, she takes Alpha Wayman's word on what's happening in the battle against Jobu. Evelyn immediately takes on the role of a hero fighting evil. She saw that she can accomplish extraordinary feats. Evelyn's brief, genuine expression of love to the agent becomes a means to an end. Just another tool in the Alphaverse's arsenal to fight the so-called chaos. And Evelyn definitely kicks ass. But now, after Joy's confession, Evelyn takes a good look at her life, and she sees the real power of Yin Waymond. And she sees something that spiritual teacher Ram Dass covered in his book, Be Here Now. In reference to destructive political clashes around the globe, Ram Dass shares the following. If you're in polarity, you're creating polar opposites. You can only protest effectively when you love the person whose ideas you're protesting against as much as you love yourself. His guru, Neem Karoli Baba, told Ram Dass, tell the truth and love everybody. Now this is a hard one to swallow. If you're facing your own personal Jobu Tubaki, if you're facing the meaninglessness and the inhumanity of the world around you, how can you just love everyone? How is it possible to love those who seek to destroy and harm? Well, firstly, what Ram Dass is talking about here isn't some notion of false altruism or false nicety. This isn't about play acting or putting on a good face to the world. This is not about being nice only to get something out of it. Those are status quo game strategies. And sure, some of these game strategies have their place in navigating social situations. But this love I'm talking about, it's deeper than all that. It's not at the level of personality traits that you can learn. What we typically call love is conditional, and it is all about game playing and achieving emotional reactions within the body. It's mostly pleasure-seeking mixed with some hurt-so-good, aching, painful love, the kind found in popular music. Evelyn sees that loving kindness is intrinsic to Waymond's nature. This was in front of her the whole time, but she was too busy fighting life to see it. And when she sees it, Evelyn has an experience of unconditional universal love, what Hindu traditions call bhakti. Bhakti is universal love. As Ram Dass writes in his book, Be Love Now, you can be in love without an outer object. We often interpret love as something that comes from the outside, from the external world. But in fact, this love is a state of being. You don't attain it. You are it. This isn't some saccharine status quo sentimentality. This isn't an empty gift card platitude. This is the real deal. This is called Satchitananda, the love, truth, bliss, and universal unity of all beings. It's sort of like there's a river of true unconditional love that springs from deep within you. You're too busy in life to notice it. Some traditions call the world around us Maya. The superficial way of understanding Maya is that it's a feminine, chaotic, deceptive illusion. It's here to trap you. But this Maya, the world of experience, is not an enemy to fight. Existence, at a fundamental level, is comprised of Satchitananda, true love. And if one realizes this deep inside oneself, the experiencer and how they experience their life within Maya is transformed. Evelyn first touched this when she professed her love to the IRS agent, but now her transformative, transcendent peak experience of true love truly changes her. Abraham Maslow is well known for his hierarchy of needs, and this subject comes up all the time in school and corporate trainings. In my experience, what doesn't come up as much is his later work, where he added self-transcendence to the model. For Maslow, peak experiences like the one Evelyn has are important for true self-actualization. In peak experiences, one transcends the typical relationship game playing of life, of the status quo, and one transcends the we-they polarity found in human conflict. This is what in 8th Circuit Yoga I refer to as activation of the 8th Circuit. Maslow's peak experiences seem far out and weird, but they're certainly not uncommon. Revelatory experiences of this kind have shaped the course of human history. yet they're often glossed over or played down. Evelyn's peak experience of love allows her, for the first time, to see the other way. The other way is love. True love. This is the moment in which Evelyn becomes an archetypal representation of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, the great mother goddess, a being of boundless love and compassion. In some forms of Buddhism, the defining quality of a bodhisattva is called bodhichitta. Bodhichitta is the heart mind, full of wisdom and compassion for the benefit of all sentient beings. Bodhichitta, the heart mind, is a Buddhist term, but it goes by countless names. In Christianity, this is the Sacred Heart of Christ and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Mary is known as Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and perpetual help is indeed what the Holy Mother delivers. A bodhisattva does not rest unless all sentient beings are liberated from suffering. Evelyn now, a bodhisattva goddess Guan Yin, drops the nihilism and gets to work. Evelyn tells Yin Weiman that she's learning to fight like him. The film soundtrack refers to a following scene as the empathy fight, and one might ask, what's an empathy fight? A yin fight, an empathy fight, starts with an internal surrender. Evelyn's surrender is to the creative power of Satchitananda. She surrenders to the feeling of love itself. It flows through her. This does not mean that she gives up. It means she's putting down her sword. No more violence and harm to others as a means of getting things done. She's allowing love to flow through her, and that fuels life's magical power of creativity during this empathy fight. Martin Luther King, a paragon of nonviolent confrontation, wrote about this. Quote, "At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. It is purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative." In the following absurdist comical sequence, Evelyn weaves through Jobu's army, and at the same time spreads love through the multiverse. She expresses her love to each one of her supposed enemies through humorous, selfless acts of service. The Bhakti tradition refers to seva, selfless acts of loving service, and Evelyn does her service perfectly. Is this service supposed to be some sort of grueling nightmare or difficult fight? No, it's Leela, the play, the dance of life, the play of forms. This is Evelyn creating miracles of love. And when the inevitable challenges arise, instead of giving in to the nihilism, Evelyn doubles down on love and service. And Evelyn isn't loving each individual person because of who they are and their personality traits. Evelyn is embodying love itself. As Guan Yin, Evelyn is true love itself. This to the point of even letting her daughter go if that's the choice that love requires in the moment. This is Yin energy at its most potent, understanding, and wise. Evelyn lets go in love. Her hands have gone from fists to open, loving palms. She has turned bullets into absurdist, comedic googly eyes. And these googly eyes are ridiculous, but also representative of a yogi's realization that we are all one universal being. There is one conscious being observing through all human bodies. This one being is like the software that lives in the cloud, and all bodies are like the local hardware that accesses the software. These eyes are an archetypal representation, often found in psychedelic experiences and in some religious experiences. And if we're all one being, seeing through a multitude of eyes and living through a multitude of bodies, violence against someone else is violence against yourself. Neem Karoli Baba once pointed at a group of people eating and said something like, "Watch me eat through all of my mouths." As a bodhisattva figure, all eyes are your eyes, all arms are your arms, all bodies are your body. In this state of true love, there are no opposites. Joy was looking for another way, and she couldn't see it because she was caught up in her nihilism. The Alphaverse couldn't see it because they were caught up in their heroic crusade. But Evelyn as Guan Yin sees it all with boundless compassion. Look, I'm not here to tell you life is all flowers and sweets, rainbows and butterflies. Yes, of course, the world is full of terrible, horrific things. There is suffering. This is the first of the Buddha's noble truths. I'm not saying that Yan forceful energy is bad. There are times where force is the appropriate action. But this forcefulness as a default way of being, an overarching philosophy for living in the world, is a bad trip. The better trip is to embody oneself in the true present moment and give way to life's creative energy in order to be responsive to what is happening around you in a spontaneous way. Allowing the inner flow of love and creativity to express itself in any given moment is where it's at. The present moment could call for Yang or for Yin. And if you're truly spontaneous and open, the action will arise. This is a key aspect of some Zen traditions. And it's interesting to me that Japanese Zen is often characterized as sort of cold and emotionless compared to other forms of Eastern religion. But in some forms of Zen, Kuan Yin's heart-mind is at the centerpiece of practice. And the Zen-like absurdity covered in my previous video actually comes from the heart-mind. In more modern terms, this is what Eckhart Tolle calls the power of now. Joy in Evelyn's conflict finally ends when Evelyn shares some harsh truth with Joy. As harsh as it is, it's actually a message of love. Evelyn shares that the reason Joy searched the multiverse for her mom is because she wanted to be loved. The reason was love. After all the bombastic, pataphysical battling, Evelyn ends the conflict by wisely and subtly integrating Yang energy with Yin energy with her stern message of love and acceptance. The other way of looking at things can be understood as the way of the Taoist. One meaning of the word Tao is the way. From the vantage point of the way, what we normally view as opposites aren't really opposites. One could say ice, water, and vapor are three different things. One is solid, one is liquid, one is gas. But this is only true from one particular point of view. When ice melts into water, it's easy to understand that it's all water. When that water evaporates, it's all vapor. For those living in the Tao, life becomes this way too. Life can be understood as one essence expressing itself in a myriad of ways. Some traditions call that the 10,000 things. At the root of the 10,000 things is this unity of being that we human beings call love. So I want to conclude with revisiting the Yin Yang symbol. It is a powerful symbol that has withstood the test of time. Recently, I came across another more modern image that I think helps communicate the radical message of the Tao for today's world. This is a 4-dimensional Klein bottle. It is studied in topology, a branch of mathematics. It's all one surface. There is no opposite side. It sort of all fluxes into itself, and somehow 4-dimensionally penetrates itself without doing any violence or crossing itself. This penetrating and receiving can be understood as similar to the sex act, and speaks to what mystics in many traditions refer to as the sacred marriage, or the alchemical marriage. You've got this forceful penetrating power of Yang, and you've got this yielding receptive power of Yin. And they're married together into one unity, which has no opposites. The reason I bring this up is to try to make the point that the Yin Yang symbol isn't only telling us that there's a little bit of bad in good and a little bit of good in bad. It's also that all polarities are expressions of the same thing. Cameron Brown reimagined the Yin Yang symbol in various ways. I like this one because it uses the Klein bottle as a source of inspiration for reimagining the Yin Yang symbol. The so-called enlightened person intuitively feels there's this unity within all things, regardless of what polarities present themselves in a situation. Yin Yang, order and chaos, formless and form, matter and space, something and nothing, conscious and unconscious, positive and negative, meaning and meaninglessness, sense and nonsense. The yogi experiences it all as a deep, unified state of being. That experience of unity is true love. If one taps into that love, a powerful creative sense of service arises organically. Only this powerful energy can truly transform the status quo. And with that, we've come to the end of the series. If you're interested in learning more about the subjects that I've brought up, please check out other videos on this channel, especially the 8 Circuit Yoga program. Thanks for watching.